All right, y'all, we're in the thick of the playoff time. I'm going to try to give you guys some picks that if you guys are needing some help, you may even be able to find on your waiver wire. First off, let's start over with the quarterback position. We're going to go over with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones going against the Vikings defense, giving up the 5th most points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Jones is a very capable quarterback. I think he can easily put up a good fantasy game with you against the Vikings. I mean, every quarterback except for Matt Ryan has completely lit up this Vikings secondary. Don't sleep on Daniel Jones. If you need some help at the quarterback position, maybe you had Jalen Hurts and you don't really want to go with Gardner Minshew. If he misses it, Daniel Jones, I think would be a really good fill-in. Get Daniel Jones in your lineup. The next quarterback we're going to talk about is going to be Sam Darnold. Darnold going against the Lions defense, giving up the most points per game to opposing quarterbacks. He's playing clean football so far. No interceptions in the 3 games he's been back from injury. Darnold's looking really good since they released Baker Mayfield. He's really taking command of this team. He wants to be the starter moving forward, and he's actually making a good case for it. Going against this Lions defense, I mean, he should be able to shred him up. As long as he stays out of the turnover ratio, he should be able to just throw the ball down the field at will. Sam Darnold could be a good start for you this week. The next start we're going to talk about is going to be Geno Smith. Geno Smith going against the Chiefs defense, who gives up the 4th most points to opposing quarterbacks. Geno Smith's having a stellar year. A lot of people kind of wrote him off as being maybe a backup quarterback, if that. Now he's stepped in for Russell Wilson. He's completely taken over the starter role. Looks like it's Geno Smith's team for the upcoming years. He needs to be able to keep up with Patrick Mahomes this week for any chance to win. He has great outside weapons and Lockett and DK Metcalf. He should be able to produce some good numbers for you this week against the Chiefs. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to the running back position. The first guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Zach Moss. Moss going against the Chargers defense, giving up the 6th most points per game to opposing running backs. He had 67% of the snaps last week after filling in for Jonathan Taylor. He had 24 carries, 81 yards last week. He should be able to produce some type of similar numbers this week. He really should dominate the backfield touches this week. Get Zach Moss in your lineups. Next guy I'm going to talk about is going to David Montgomery. Montgomery going against the Bills defense, who is giving up the 12th least points per game to opposing running backs, but Raheem Mostert just tore them up, and I think David Montgomery could do that. They may want to lighten the load for Justin Fields, and I think David Montgomery could be in a prime position to put up some really solid numbers this week. Next guy I'm going to talk about, a little bit off the radar. I haven't really seen anybody even talk about this guy, but I'm going to say Rachaad White. Rachaad White taking on the Cardinals defense, who's given up the 7th most points per game to opposing running backs. I'm going to say that Fournette fumbled that ball in the second half last week. Even though they credited Tom Brady with the fumble, I completely think that Fournette was the reason for that, and they don't like fumblers over there. Rachaad White got the start last week. He's going to get the start again this week, and he should be able to see even more carries with the question marks surrounding Fournette. Get Rachaad White in your lineups. Now let's go ahead and talk about these wide receivers. First guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Darius Slayton. Slayton going against the Vikings defense, who's given up the 3rd most points per game to opposing wide receivers. He's actually averaging 7 targets a game the last 5 weeks. The production should be here against this secondary. Slayton should be able to produce pretty much wide receiver 1 numbers for this offense. The wide receiving core is completely depleted, and I think they should be able to throw all over the field of this Vikings. Get Darius Slayton in your lineup. Another guy a lot of people may not know here, but I'm going to talk about Chris Moore. Moore going against the Titans defense, who's giving up the most points per game to opposing wide receivers. The Titans just can't cover the deep ball, and that's where Moore comes into play now. He doesn't have consistent week in and week out. We're really looking for this boom week, and now that you're in the playoffs, you need somebody that you can slot into your flex that could give you a monster game. We're talking about over 20 points. Could be Chris Moore. I really like him to have a blow-up week this week. Get Chris Moore in your lineup. The last wide receiver we're going to talk about today is going to be Jahan Dotson. Dotson going against the 49ers defense, giving up the 13th most points per game to opposing wide receivers. He had 15 targets the last 2 weeks combined. Last week, 4 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Jahan Dotson's starting to come alive a little bit. He's taken over more of Curtis Samuel's type of role. So it's somebody that I would like to get based into your lineup. He's a good second fiddle to Terry McLaurin. Get Dotson in your lineup. Now we're going to talk about these tight end spots, and I know sometimes it's hard to find a good tight end, but I have a really good tight end for you guys who could either be available or may already be on your roster, but it's going to be Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, he's a tight end for the Saints. They're going against the Browns this week, who gives up the 6th least points to opposing tight ends, but he has a lot of targets. He's a very high target tight end, which is what you really want. He had a team high 6 targets last week. Andy Dalton is starting to trust Juwan Johnson. He's somebody you can kind of depend on for a solid floor of points, and that's going to be really important now that's into the playoffs. Get Juwan Johnson in your lineups. Next guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Cade Otton. Cade Otton going against that Cardinals defense that I've told you guys all season long. Start your tight ends against the Cardinals. They're giving up the most points per game to opposing tight ends. They can't stop anybody. Cade Otton was outplayed last week by Cameron Brate, but don't let that fool you. I think this is going to be an Otton game. Get him in your lineup. Guys, it's the playoffs. You got to make the plays. You got to grow those cojones, and you got to make the plays that's going to win you these championships. And this Cade Otton play could be it. Next guy we're going to talk about is going to be Evan Ingram going against the Jets defense. They're giving up the second least points per game to opposing tight ends. He could see an increased volume due to just having a good secondary for the Jets. They do have Sauce Gardner out there, and I think he's going to be able to cover a lot of these wideouts here. That I think just Evan Ingram over the middle, you should be able to see quite a few targets from him. Evan Ingram's been lighting it up here lately these last few weeks. Keep him going into your lineup. Start Evan Ingram this week. Now let's talk about the Bengal Tigers start of the week. The first Bengal Tiger start of the week at the quarterback position, we're going to talk about Tua Tagovailoa. Tagovailoa is going against the Packers defense, who gives up the 11th least points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but don't hear what I'm not saying. The Dolphins are starting to catch fire again. They were early in the season. They flattened out a little bit. Now they're starting to pick it back up. Aaron Rodgers on the other side is going to be wanting to prove a point. Should be more of a shootout. I think with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and everybody else on the field, they're going to be throwing the ball everywhere. I mean, I'm saying get Tua in your lineups. Next Bengal Tiger start of the week, we'll go with the running back position. We're going to talk about Jerick McKinnon. McKinnon going against that Seahawks defense, who's given the second most points per game to opposing running backs. Chiefs like to ride the hot hand. The hot hand right now is McKinnon. He should be an electrifying play against the Seahawks defense. He did great last week. I think he's going to do great this week. Get McKinnon in your lineup. The Bengal Tiger start of the week for the wide receiver position, I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be DJ Moore. Moore is going against that Lions defense, who's given the second most points per game to opposing wide receivers. Darnold and Moore had the connection before the injury. They have the connection now. They should have an absolute field day against the secondary. It should be a close matchup as well. The Lions and the Panthers should be able to keep up with each other, which only bodes well more for DJ Moore to be getting more receptions. I don't think it's going to be a positive game script for the whole game. So they're not going to be just running the ball out. They're going to be throwing quite a bit. That should be able to rack up nice little points for you for DJ Moore. Get him in your lineup. Now, the last Bengal Tiger start of the week is going to be at the tight end position. I know what some of you guys are saying, but I'm going to say Mark Andrews. Yeah, I know. They're going against the Falcons defense this week, who gives it the fifth most points per game to opposing tight ends. Huntley should get the start again. I don't see Lamar Jackson starting, but in the last 3 weeks combined, Mark Andrews only had 9 receptions for 101 yards and no touchdowns. I see a comeback game. Put it on the dime, stamp it down right here. Don't bench Mark Andrews. You drafted him high for a reason. You're in the playoffs now. He will come through for you this week. Put Mark Andrews in your lineup.